Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar. Today's topic is on upgrades and network security with presenters Jerry Finn from Accord & Company and Bill Billand from Managed Technical Services. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone is in listen-only mode, so if you have questions, please type them into the questions box on the screen, and we will address them at the end of the session. This webinar will be recorded, and we will email out a copy to everyone later today. I will now turn it over to you, Jerry.
Good morning, everybody. This is Jerry Finn. I've worked with at least 12 or 13 customers on this list of attendees that I recognize. So if I've spoken to you already, nice to speak to you again. If not, good morning and nice to meet you. So we're going to talk about my agenda. I'm just going to go a little bit over my background. We're going to talk about Sage 300 upgrades. We're going to talk about server migrations, data archives, system checkups, and network assessments from the Sage 300 standpoint. My background is I've been a director of technologies for Accord since 2013, I think is the right year. So I've been there for 4 years. I have over 30 years of IT experience working with all kinds of applications, from writing software, system implementations, and things of that nature. I have a bachelor's of business administration from Hofstra University, but not just in computer science. I have it in business computers. I'm really like a systems analyst that goes from design to implementation with all kinds of system upgrades, and that's normally what I do at Accord, and I've done this for some of the largest customers that Sage has had. So when I started working with Sage in 2008, I was actually working for a customer, and at that time it was the largest Sage 300 install that I believe Sage had. We had 200 active users using Sage 300 all the time. It was a very large implementation. It went very well, and after that, Anthony decided to hire me from my experience with that. So I've been involved with companies that have up to 2,200 employees, and I've done professional experience mostly in construction for over 20 years, professional and services, nonprofit, wholesale distribution, service industries, maintenance, engineering, and even some manufacturing background. The first thing I want to talk about is why the Sage 300 you need to upgrade. To make a long story short, you need to stay on the current version, and I'm jumping around a little bit on my itinerary, but when you call into Sage support, there's only 2 versions that are currently supported, and there's only 2 versions that are currently supported at the year end. So every year, like at the end of this year, there will be version 16 and version 17, one that is supported. So if you call in January 1st and you have an issue with version 15, they're not going to not support you, but it might come to the point where they say, you know what, this is an upgrade, you need to get on the latest version. We can't spend any more time investigating this because we're not looking at the latest programs. Also, at the year ends for 16 and 17, if you use the system for payroll and accounts payable, you have to install the year-end updates, and those will only be installed for 16 and 17. They will not be available for 15. So if you're going to do 1099s and W-2s, you need to use that. With the active support plan, you want to upgrade because there's enhancements that you may want to use out of the system. The biggest one lately is the change of operating systems and workstation systems. Windows 7 is going away. Everybody buying now is Windows 10 workstations, and servers now are Server 2012 and Server 2016. You need to be on the latest 2 versions of Sage in order to support those. If you're running version 15 and you're running on a Windows 10 or a Server 2016 platform, you might get some sort of issues where it'll come across and say, you know what, this version is not supported on that platform. We need to go to 16 or 17 to eliminate all those issues. In addition to that, there's system enhancements that as you move along in the software, it adds features. Like one big one is an accounts payable inactivating old vendors. That was something that came out of 2 versions ago, I believe, where you could actually mark your vendors as being inactive and they wouldn't show up on all your reports. People really loved that. And there's a lot of little enhancements like that come out in each single version. With doing the upgrades, though, I don't like to be on what I call the bleeding edge. I wouldn't upgrade to the newest version until it's been released for at least 30 days. Even though Sage come out with a release, it's just like every other software company. They come out with a release, goes out to public, and within 30 days they're sending out another release of patches. I would always wait at least 30 days to see where that is. So if Sage comes out with version 17 on July 1st, I wouldn't think about going to it till, say, August 1st. And let me go to the next page, sorry. So on the upgrades, every year, I kind of talked about this, every year there's an accounting update, and that is necessary for every year end. And that is usually released in the fourth quarter, but in actuality, it's always released like December 15th or later. So in between the time of December 15th and the time that you do your W-2s, the 1099s, you have to install all the year-end patches. So now if you have those year-end patches and they're only going to be on version 16 or 17, you want to do your upgrade in advance. You don't want to wait until after December 15th to do your upgrade and do your year-end patches at the same time, if at all possible. You want to try and get your upgrade done earlier in the year and then do your patches. Okay, do your year-end update. How do you know what version you're on? I get asked that question a lot. Basically, if you go into TS Main or Sage Desktop and you hit the Help About, the version that you're using is 16.1, which you'll see right here, but this is the important one, Rev 5. These numbers, 16.1.4, really lead to a bunch of confusion, but it's 16.1 Rev 5, so this is revision 5. Same thing if you went into TS Main and hit the Help About, your version 16.1 Rev 5. So that's the latest patches or version that was up at that time, and you want to make sure you're on the latest when you get to the year end. Okay. All right. How do you know what versions are available? Sage always emails the customers when the latest version and or accounting updates are released. If you're not on an email list from Sage and you're working with the Sage product, you want to make sure that you get yourself signed up for it. If you're not sure how to do that, you can feel free to contact the coordinator to find out how to get on it. And usually the current year version tells you what's available. So the current calendar year is 2017. Sage has now changed their version numbers to match the years for Sage 300. So in 2017, the current version is version 17. That's the latest. Last year's version is version 16. So this year, 2 versions will be supported at the end of the year, version 17 and 16. Next year, towards the end of the year, there'll be a version 18, I'm sure, released, and it'll be, in 2018, there'll be version 18 and version 17. That'll be supported at the year end. So that's the easiest way to know what's available. System upgrades, when you do the upgrade, they can be complicated, and you should not do them yourself unless you are knowledgeable about all the steps. A lot of IT companies think that they can do it, and if they've never done it before, you don't want them to just say, oh yeah, I can figure it out and go do your accounting update, because you're dealing with your accounting data. You're not dealing with Word and Excel files. This is accounting data that you use to generate your payroll, and the least amount of downtime is the best way. Also, all of the ancillary third-party add-ins needs to be taken into account that they're compatible, like periodically, TimberScan, and there's other more and more third-party add-ins and Sage add-ins that the versions need to be in sync. So if anything, the upgrades are getting more complicated from all the add-ins as opposed to getting simpler. Okay. Server migrations. As your server gets older, it will be necessary to place them. The recommended lifespan of a server and all computer equipment is 3 years. I wish I was always working for a company that could get rid of them in 3 years, but most people try and stretch them out to 5. That'll usually keep you in a good window. But if you start seeing workstations or servers that are over 5 years, you want to get rid of them and replace them, because if you're going to start paying hardware maintenance on them, it's going to cost you more in the hardware maintenance than it would cost you to have new hardware. If you were leasing it or whatever the case may be, you could usually get new hardware before then. When you replace your server, you will need to migrate your programs from the old server to the new one. You won't be able just to copy the folders in it. It's not a simple copy. It's migrating. Sage does that with a migration tool that we leave all the existing applications running on the old server. We set up the new server, and we migrate the data and the programs one piece at a time and verify that they go through 100% complete without any errors before we move on to the next step. So then after that server migration is completed, you then go to the workstations and have the workstations upgraded from the new server. Okay. I said those server migrations, again, it's kind of like the upgrades. They can be complicated, and you definitely want to make sure that you know all the necessary steps, and I would not suggest doing it if you've never done it before. The third parties, just like the upgrades always need to be taken into account. One that's like periodical. Usually when you go do a migrate, you have to upgrade it to the latest version, because once you upgrade it or migrate it, they only want to do it with the latest version. TimberScan has new patches that they want to have installed, and the list goes on and on for all these third-party add-ins. Accordant does do all these server migration services. Actually, I'm the one that probably does most of them. And like I said, your IT company can figure them out, but they don't always do it 100% well. And I can't tell you how many times I wound up bailing out an IT company because they did the upgrade and it didn't go through properly, or server migration. I wouldn't suggest not putting yourself in that position. Okay. I think I'm going pretty fast here. Data archives. In the Sage 300 system, data is in the system pretty much forever. It never really goes away. So what happens is, if the data is sitting in the files, it'll make the system slower. The way the Sage files work, as you go into a screen inquiry or a report, it always comes up and prompts you with what kind of file do you want to use. Do you want to use the new file, the current file, or the history file? So the difference between these three is the new file contains unposted entries. So anybody that does payroll spends a lot of time with the new file because they enter the hours in there, they print the checks, they post them, and then they process them. Once they do that step, it then goes to the current file. The current file contains all the posted entries that have not been moved to the history file. So this is where most people have all their data, is in the current file. I'll go into a company sometimes and they'll have, however long they've been using Sage, all the data stays in there. Then the history file contains posted entries that have been moved from the current file to the history. Nothing automatically gets moved from current to the history. You have to select what you want to move there. And that's what we call for data archiving. So why do you want to go through this data archiving? Is it makes the system run much, much faster. It makes the users more productive, and all the reports and screen inquiries will run quicker. Kind of like I said before, if you have 12 years of data in your current file, the programs read all that data and display it when you run a screen inquiry or report. So if you went into, I'm going to use payroll example, you went into the check inquiry, when you first go in, you see every check that was there for 12 years. So you go run a payroll report, it goes and looks at all the data for 12 years, and then filters out the data for the dates that you want to run. So imagine running a payroll, going to run a report and saying, I want to look at checks that were done in 2017, and you have to go and say, get rid of all the 14, 15, 16, all the previous years just to have the report work properly. That's what the system does behind the scenes, where if everything is moved from the current file to the history file, you don't have to wait for that to process. So the recommendations for the data archive plan, and most of the time when we do a data archive for somebody, we wind up putting together a plan for them and how to go through it on a regular basis. We suggest you run your data archive at a year end. Always keep 2 full years of data in your current files, and that's just a recommendation. For example, when you close the year end for 2016, you would move all entries up to December 31st, 14 to the history file. As the year moves along, you would have all your 2015, 2016, and then your 2017 records. So in actuality, you'd be able to do your financial statements for 2 years, 15, 16, and as 17 rolls along, you'll have all the transactions and have 3 years worth of data. At the year end for 2017, you move the entries from the current file to the history file and for up to December 31st, and so on, 15. There is documentation on how to do the year-end. It's in how to do the data archive. It's in the year-end guidebook. It's step-by-step instructions how to archive your data. When you do that, you must have a dedicated system to archive your data. You can't do it while anybody's using it. They may take quite some time to process, especially the first time if you're moving 12 years of data. We suggest after that you run a compact files under the file doctor when you're done and fix any data errors that come up. When we do it, we usually get customers request that, hey, tell us how to do this on an ongoing basis, and we'll do that. And the first time you do it, you may want to have Accordant do it to avoid any issues. So when I do it for most customers, we'll set up a time saying, okay, we're going to do this on Friday night at 1 o'clock. We'll start on the system then, and then I'll just keep working on get the data archived on Friday night until it's done, so that when people come in on Monday, all the applications are done. Depending on, it's hard to put a time frame on it because it depends on the amount of data you have, how many years worth of information you have in it, how fast your processes are. Do you do union payroll? Do you not do union payroll? Things of that nature, which can slow it down quite a bit. And just to back up a second, with the way the system works, you don't lose anything when you move it from the current file to the history file. You don't lose any reporting capabilities or any inquiry capabilities. So like when you go in to run a report now, and it's job costing or anything, the system comes up. When it prompts you, if you want to look at the current file, you could click on the current file and the history file and the new file. You can select all three of them, and they could still appear all in the report. The other thing that a lot of people want to make sure on, in the current file, all open transactions stay there. And what I mean by that is if there's an accounts receivable invoice that is outstanding and it's 5 years old, it'll still remain in the current file. It will not be moved from the current file to the history file because you still owed money on it. The same thing with accounts payable. If you have open invoices, they will be there. If they're fully paid and they were paid up until the cutoff date, they will be moved to the history file. If you have job costing transactions for a job that's been going on for, say, 5 years, it'll take the ones that are over 2 years old and move them to the history file. You could always run a job cost report saying, I want to look at the current file and the history file to get all those details. But normally you run a job cost report, you're looking at the current file and just looking at the recent transaction. But the way the job costing system works, all the life-to-date job totals include all the numbers, whether they're from the history file or whenever. So if you're looking at total cost, total billing, total labor costs, it'll have all those numbers if the job was 5 years old, even though 3 years old worth of the data is in the history file. So you don't lose anything by doing it. You're basically just making the system run quicker and more efficient. The only reason I would say that this could be an issue for the current file and the history file is if you've had custom reports written, and they never were designed to look at the history file. But all the SAGE reports out of the box are designed to look at the current file and the history file. Okay. So kind of talked about why we do the data archive, went past that, how to do it. Okay. System checkups. You want to make sure, I kind of talked about this before, you always want to make sure your current server operating systems are supported for the system and for Microsoft. Windows XP recently got taken off support from Microsoft, so there's no more security patches. Sage software won't run on it. There's a bunch of other packages on it. You don't want to get yourself into that program of having that situation of having an operating system that's over 10 years old. So when we go in and we do a system checkup, we kind of look around, see what your workstations are, and make sure that, hey, what you're doing is no longer supported, it's not going to be supported, or you're going to go forward and you're going to have issues with it. So the operating system is a big one. 2008 is only supported now in 2012 and 2016. 2008 is going to be going away. It's not going to be supported anymore in version 17 with some of the add-ins. So you want to be thinking about upgrading your server to Windows 2012 or 2016. I recommend to everybody now, if they're putting in a new server, that they go, oops, sorry, I went backwards, went 3 times backwards, that they install Windows 2016 on the server. A lot of IT companies don't want to do that because they're not familiar with it, but they should start doing it and go into 2016. Why go to 2012 when that operating system is 4 years? They're going to have to learn how to get through it anyway. Workstation operating systems, we're still constantly buying machines of Windows 7 Professional. That is not planning on going away yet, but I would start moving all new machines to Windows 10. I would not use Windows 8. I would skip 8, just go right to Windows 10. So if you're getting a new machine, I would suggest going to Windows 10. Okay. So when we do the system checkup, we look at all the system requirements. We make sure that the servers and workstations meet all the SAGE system requirements. So the memory, what processors they're using, and what operating system. Something else you should be looking at is your hard disk space. you should always be monitoring your server hard drive space. You should never really go past 80% capacity on your hard drive. It'll make the system run slower. Even as the our hardware gets faster and faster, there's still certain things you can't improve. And if the drive is filling up, you are going to have experience problems. When it fills up totally, the server will crash, and you won't be able to restart it. That'll be quite an issue for your IT company to straighten that one out. So you always want to monitor how much hard drive space you have. Okay. The other thing we look at is to make sure you have virus protection. What version you're using? Is it running on the servers? Is it running on the workstations? We also make sure to verify that your virus protection has exclusions in it with the Sage directories. If you have virus protection on and it's searching that Sage directory every single time you open a program or change it, you will see a decrease in performance. You want to have them exclude those programs from it, and there's a knowledge-based article on how to do that. Okay. The network assessments kind of is almost the same thing I was talking about with the system requirements. I kind of jumped around into it, but we offer the service that will actually go in and look at it, review your system requirements, go over the operating system, the process, the memory, verify your disk space, verify your virus protections, and provide a written report of findings and recommendations of any issues that we find or things that are appropriate, and find that you don't have to worry about for a while. So that's my presentation, and do we have questions at this time, Krista, that you want to address?
Okay, if you have a question, please type it into the box, and we'll be happy to answer it for you. One question we have is there a cost associated with this update?
If you're on maintenance for Sage, the update of the software is free. What we have to charge for is time and materials for our labor to implement it. So the software you're entitled to, it's free. It's just our labor, you're paying for our labor to install it.
Okay, it doesn't look like we have any more questions at this time. If you do think of something, please type it in the box, and we'll be happy to answer it. So we're going to move over now to Bill. Bill, I just made you the presenter. Bill Dillon from Managed Technical Services is going to go over network security with everyone now.
All right, thanks, Krista. Can you see the right screen? We had a couple issues getting started this morning.
You're good to go.
Fantastic. Hi, everybody. My name is Bill Billand. I'm the founder and managing partner of Managed Technical Services. And just a quick commercial before we get started. Oh, too many screens here. Just a quick commercial about who we are. We are an MSP, or a managed service provider. We're focused on removing the burdens of technology from small and mid-sized businesses. We've been at it for 25 years. We proactively monitor and manage our clients' environments to produce a near zero downtime. That's obviously our goal. And we boast an unmatched trouble ticket response time of 15 minutes or less. That's something I'm very adamant about with my staff. It's one of the topics of every week's meeting. And a healthy, trouble-free network is obviously more profitable for our clients. It's also more profitable for us, which keeps us very interested in keeping them safe. And yeah, that's me. And I do have 2 feet. I don't know what happened there. So this is what I call the 9 major topics of business security, or business environment security. And I stress environment because it's really not just network security anymore. I remember years ago there were just 2 topics, antivirus and backup. But we'll be touching on all these topics very, very briefly during this presentation. And if anybody wants to get into anything in more depth, by all means, our contact information will be at the end. You can reach out to me. So let's get started. So quickly, why is cybersecurity so important? It's getting a lot of press now, and I think you really have to live under a rock not to have heard some of it. But first, let's talk about why. Really, it's very, very easy to become a cyber criminal. You don't have to be a computer genius anymore to be an effective bad guy. The tools are effective, they're readily available, they're cheap. All you need to know is where to look for them, where to find them. So anybody can do it, which is really scary. Second, because the threats are everywhere. As you'll see in a few minutes, we're going to show you a short video to demonstrate just how easy it is to become a victim. Third, because the threats keep changing. The bad guys are always circumventing our defenses, so we need to constantly up our game to stay ahead of them. Fourth and most obvious, because you can't survive without your data. Imagine coming to the office and having that Timberline database unavailable. I think we all understand what that means. And fifth, because so many businesses or business owners are dangerously ignorant about the risks out there today. They're much more sophisticated and many more of them now than there ever have been. And if you think your business is just too small to be a target or a victim of a cyber attack, you really need to think again. 81% of all data breaches happen to businesses with 100 or fewer employees, and that's up 10% since last year. Smaller businesses are easy targets. We spend less on security than the big guys, which is no secret. So to the bad guys, our money is just as green, and it's a lot easier to take. 1 in 5 small businesses will suffer some type of cybercrime this year. I kind of think that number is a little bit low, just from our experience with what we're seeing. But there is some good news. 97% of all breaches can be prevented with some training and today's technology if it's deployed properly. That kind of shines a light on what's actually going on. Is a lot of people just aren't deploying their technology properly. So the next slide is going to show that video I was telling you about, so let's have a look at that.
Hackers are everywhere. From Ashley Madison to JP Morgan, from Jennifer Lawrence to the federal government. Our biggest celebrities, corporations, and institutions have all been the targets of devastating cyber attacks. I wanted to see how bad a hack can get. So I invited a few of the world's best hackers to try to hack me and show me where my vulnerabilities are. This might not have been the best idea. What can a hacker with serious coding skills do? I asked Dan Tentler, a well-known security researcher, to turn all of his firepower on me.
I did get into quite a number of things that I found.
So what were the first things you did? How did you start hacking me?
I quickly found your Squarespace blog and had an idea. Basically what I did was created a bogus Squarespace site and sent an email to you, a phish asking you to go to this website, run this certificate installer.
And I did it, because I'm an idiot.
So once you ran that, it gave me access to your computer, and I created several fake pop-ups that looked like system pop-ups that would ask you for your credentials.
You didn't even have to have my passwords.
No, you gave them to me.
I gave them to you.
Yeah. So I stole your 1Password keychain.
And 1Password is where I store all my other passwords. So effectively
And your social security number and your Amex stuff and all your stock trading and bank information. I can send email to everyone in this room as you. I am you right now, if I wanted to be. If my evilness is working correctly, it should actually be taking pictures of your desktop and pictures through your webcam every 2 minutes. And I have been watching you for about 2 days now. In coffee shops, at your mom's house, on a plane. Here's your editing stuff. There's you like.
Oh my God! So
nervous.
this is literally
every 2 minutes
through my webcam.
Yeah, through this guy.
How badly could you have messed up my life?
I could have made you homeless. I could have made you homeless and penniless.
How?
Like,
how would you make me homeless?
Like I have control of your digital life in its entirety. I have all your credentials. I have all your access to all your financial information, all your work information, all your personal information. I can pay people with your bank account or your Amex account. I am you. I can fully impersonate. Like the only thing I couldn't doctor would be like your fingerprints.
This is like as bad as it gets.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's bad.
I used to think of hackers as being sort of fringe characters, but now when so much of our lives are lived on these connected devices, they're power brokers. They can make or break us.
I'm trying to log into our account.
I stole your 1Password keychain.
I mean, they know more about this stuff than anyone, and that's a power that is going to become increasingly valuable. We need to know where our flaws are so that we can be safer. Typically, I feel more secure now than I did last week, because now at least I know what I have to fix.
Basically, the gist of that video, that guy invites a well-known hacker to hack him to see one, if it's possible, and just how easy it is. And it was pretty easy. I mean, what he ended up doing was creating a phish, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and sent it to the victim. And the irony is that the phish was an email that kind of alluded to making his connection to the internet more secure. So of course he clicked on it. It gave the hacker access to his computer, and from there he can do basically whatever he wants. So I won't get further into the video about that. And the bottom line is it's ridiculously simple to become the victim of a phish, and once you do, there's nothing on your system that is secure any longer. And in most cases, you'll have no idea that you've been compromised, which is really scary, which is exactly what happened in this video. He didn't know he was compromised, and the hacker just produced a bunch of fake pop-up messages asking him to log into various places on his PC, various applications. And when he did, he gave away all his credentials. So what is ransomware? In the video, the guy dropped a phish in the guy in the guy's email, in the victim's email, and he basically took the bait. And in most cases, that bait today results in the delivery of some type of ransomware payload. So this is a long slide, but I won't get too technical. Let me just say that ransomware is just what it sounds like. Your company data is basically encrypted and held hostage, and you're forced to pay a ransom to get it back. So you come in the morning and you try and maybe access some files on your server or Timberline or whatever the case may be, and you get a big nasty black screen, and it gives you all the instructions on how to jump through the hoops and get your data back. And the unfortunate thing is, if you do have to pay the ransom, you have to do it in untraceable bitcoins, which is a real pain in the butt. I won't get into what bitcoins are, but it's very, very cumbersome to actually acquire bitcoins and pay the ransom with that. Now, obviously, the best defense against ransomware is, first, not get it, but if you do have it, multiple backups are really the best situation after a ransomware attack. But you really, really need to periodically test those backups to make sure they're actually not infected. It's happened already, and it was a big deal in the circles I'm in when I believe it was a town down somewhere in Georgia where the actual municipality got attacked with ransomware. And what the virus did was encrypt the backup sets for 30 or more days before it encrypted the live data. So when the administrators came in that morning, they got that big black screen with the nasty message. They did what any one of us would do. They went to the backups and said, well, we're not going to pay the ransom. We're going to go to last night's backup. Well, the backup was encrypted, as was the night before that and the night before that and so on. So basically what it came down to, they had one option, which was to pay the ransom. And it was a hefty ransom. So what can we do? It's not all doom and gloom. Like I said earlier, a lot of problems can be avoided with a little bit of effort. Adhering to the best practices goes a long way in protecting your business, and a lot of us just don't adhere to the best practices. They're going to sound very obvious in some cases, but if you ask yourself, is everybody in your office adhering to them, you might be surprised with your own answers. Employee mistakes account for 95% of all data breaches, and it's not usually intentional. Many times it's an employee with good intentions that just makes a bad mistake. If you think about the staff in your office, do you think they realize how important security is? It's gotten more and more important over the years, and they probably just don't realize it. Do you think they understand that they have an active role in protecting your business? Again, we're finding a lot of people don't really believe that they do. Sometimes they don't realize just how easy it is to give away important information that could put the business in jeopardy, whether it's a scam over the phone or responding to an email with information that seems safe to distribute. A lot of times we don't realize what we're really doing when we respond to these people. So employee security training is something to consider. It increases awareness and it creates a culture of security, which is really an important goal these days. And it's really not that expensive. There's a lot of options for training your employees, and more every day. So if you can't confidently say that your staff understands the risks of working online and knows how to protect themselves, you really need to consider some type of training, because really every one of them could give away the keys to the kingdom, and I think we all need to realize that. They should be able to spot and react appropriately to a phishing attempt. When they get the emails with various calls to action, they should be able to spot that and know what to do. They need to understand the risks of bad password habits and using mobile devices and memory sticks and posting information on social media sites. You'll be surprised how the information about a company or an individual can be kind of gathered together from various locations, and it creates a pretty informative picture, especially if you're the target someone's after. Obviously, they need to be made aware of current scams. There's always a new scam. I'm about to send out my pre-holiday email reminder to everyone, reminding them to look out for the typical holiday scans. You're going to see a lot of emails coming from, or what look like they're coming from, FedEx and UPS and the Postal Service. You've probably seen them. We're having a problem delivering a package. Click here to trace your package, whatever the case may be. That's just a reoccurrence of not a current scam, but you'll see it again during the holiday season, and that'll be quickly followed by emails that will pretend to be from the IRS about your tax returns. After January, you'll see a lot of those. So, they need to be made aware of what's happening. Back to that culture of security, the employees and the staff, they need to be comfortable bringing their concerns and suggestions to management. A lot of times, the mindset is that security is someone else's responsibility, and that's really a dangerous situation. I think we all need to realize that we play a role in securing the business, especially now more than ever. So right up there with untrained employees is weak passwords, and maybe someone's been banging this drum in your office before, but I can't tell you how many times I found companies with little or no control over their passwords. I'm talking about password strength, password lifespan, and protection. I know it sounds simple, but I'll bet most businesses on the webinar today could improve their password habits and policies. And it needs to start at the top. I found that the higher up you are on the corporate ladder, the less likely you are to abide by password policies. And that's why executives are usually the best targets. If you ask yourself right now, when's the last time you changed your password? I'll bet some of you can't answer that. This is the anti-everywhere slide. If you don't already have anti-everything, you really should look into it. For what this stuff costs, it's worth every penny. But be careful. I'm talking about the antivirus, anti-malware, spam filters, things like that. Don't have overlapping products, because they will slow down your network. Jerry was talking about the antivirus and the exclusions for Timberline, things like that. It's important that you have these, but they have to be configured properly. Sometimes one new product can take the place of 2 or more older products and do a better job. For instance, we're finding behavior-based endpoint protection, for example. That can replace antivirus and anti-malware, and it's basically those 2 products together in one solution. But it's been our experience that the behavior-based endpoint protection runs faster and it does a better job than the two traditional products combined. So really, the point is, don't just renew what you have. Take a look, have a conversation with your IT people. Find out what's working today, because the threats are changing. We need to always up our game to address the new threats. Like I said earlier, the bad guys are always finding new ways to sidestep our security. So, we need to be on our game and look for new solutions as well. I've included device policy and data encryption on this slide together because generally when we're talking about encryption, we're also talking about mobile devices and laptops, and any device policy should include some type of encryption for portable devices. You think about the folks on your staff, if they're using their own devices for email, their own cell phones or laptops or tablets for email or for working from home, you need to ask yourself, what happens when that person is no longer an employee? Do you have the legal right to delete the corporate data from their laptop or cell phone or whatever? You probably do, but sometimes when you delete that data, it also wipes out the entire device. So it presents a sticky situation that we've been in personally, or professionally with some of our clients. And when we're asked to go in and wipe out an ex-employee's device, it inevitably generates a phone call, and it's not a happy phone call to us. And then we're kind of stuck in the middle, and we're doing what the client is paying us to do. But if you have a policy right up front that says, protects, it states your rights and protects them, it's going to help out when those sticky situations come up. And what about when a laptop gets stolen? We talked about encryption a few minutes ago. Unencrypted data can so easily be taken off a stolen hard drive. Anybody worth his salt can take the hard drive out of a stolen laptop. It doesn't have to have a password. Even if it does, it doesn't matter. They take the hard drive out and basically copy all the data. But if that hard drive was encrypted, they've literally got no chance of getting that data back. And what you might not know is a lot of times the ability to encrypt the data already exists. Windows 10 has that ability. So if your laptops are running Windows 10, it's not going to cost you a dime to encrypt that data, but you do have to turn it on. This is the simplest slide there is. Basically, if it can be updated, it should be updated. And if it can't be updated, it should be replaced. Jerry was talking about Windows XP. That's a great example. You can't update Windows XP. It has vulnerabilities that are known to the whole world, and they're never going to go away. If you're using Windows XP, make it a priority to get rid of that system. The threats are changing all the time. The updates and patches are the industry's way of responding to those threats. So, they've got to be installed. And I'm not talking about just PCs and file servers. Firewalls, routers, access points, even cell phones. Again, if it can be updated, it should be. We've all heard of the Equifax breach. You probably are already aware that that breach was made possible by an uninstalled patch. The manufacturer found the vulnerability and patched it, but it never made it to that server. Firewalls. It's almost an injustice to talk about firewalls so quickly. But what you need to know is just having a firewall is not enough. And a lot of people, because they don't really understand what a firewall is, it doesn't get configured properly. It's like installing an alarm in your house and not using it. I kind of use the analogy, if you don't know what a firewall does, and a lot of people don't, I tell people, think of it like the door to one of those private clubs in the old gangster movies. First you've got to find the door, and then when you do, you've got to know the secret knock. And then, when you use the secret knock and that little window opens in the door, you have to state your business and provide the secret code to get in. And then once you're in, you might be escorted to a very, very specific location. I know that's kind of a loose analogy, but it fits. It describes a lot of what a firewall does. The firewall is the door, and it is the guy who listens to your request, and it is the guy who validates your credentials and escorts you to your destination and make sure you go nowhere else or talk to no one else in the process. It's a very complicated device, and it's easy to plug it in and just assume it's working, but it really needs to reflect what you're doing as a business with the rest of the world. So if you simply purchased and installed a firewall without considering what it needs to do for your business, you really should have it looked at. And by all means, change the default password. We have found multiple occasions where clients, you know, they've got all the right motivation. They go and get a firewall and they install it, and they never change the default password. And if you think the bad guys don't know the default passwords, you've really got your head in the sand. We talked a little, I guess when we were talking about ransomware, we talked a little bit about backups. You know, most recovery events today are not really because of a hardware failure. They're because of a ransomware attack. Like we said earlier, you know, you get the encrypted, the message that your data is encrypted and you've got to pay ransom. Your first reaction is go to your backup. So, you know, when it's a hardware failure, it's very easy. There's no agenda. It's just an unfortunate event. You fix the hardware, you replace the data. But with a ransomware attack, there is an agenda, which is pretty interesting. You know, it's the agenda is basically to remove all your options but one. You know, pay the ransom. So a good backup solution needs to consider that. You know, it's no longer a tape drive or an external hard drive that you copy your data to. A good backup solution will actually interrogate the data and make sure there's no no ransomware or encrypted, you know, illegally encrypted data before it backs it up. And obviously, if it finds it, it makes you aware of that, so you can address it. But no matter how good you think your backup is, you really need to perform periodic fire drills to be sure it provides the protection you think it does. You know, I'll bet a lot of folks are shaking their head right now like, yeah, we do backups, but do we really know if they're working? Please test them, do the fire drills. You don't want to be caught short during an emergency when you need it most. And again, to Jerry's point, you know, not just an assessment of your environment from a SAGE point of view, but you really need to look at your entire network and have a security assessment done. You need to know what's what. You know, too many companies are just totally ignorant about their current network and security. So I tell people periodically perform a network security assessment and address what's needed. You know, we all hopefully go to the doctor once a year and get our physical. It's the same thing. You go and you find out what's wrong and you make little adjustments. You need to understand your specific situation because that'll result in better security decisions and could save some unnecessary spending. And some final thoughts, just some reminders. You know, big or small, everybody's a target. I mean, that's the point I really have to drill home because so many people have their mindset that, you know, we're not a Prudential or a Cigna or whatever the case may be. We're not a big company, so nobody's looking at us. We're flying under the radar. That's really not the case. The process of penetrating a network is completely automated and the cost is near zero. So really what's happening is the shift in cyber crime has gone from quantity to quality because it doesn't cost them anything more to attack 100 small companies or one big one. So, and we're easier targets. And like I said earlier, even stupid people can be effective bad guys, which is probably the scariest thing in this whole slide deck. And know your network. Be able to spot inconsistencies. Historic snapshots provide a great means of detecting anything that might need a closer look. You might see 20 or 30 people on your wireless network on the last snapshot and 150 currently. You know, maybe you've got uninvited guests, but you need like a baseline to compare your data to. And lastly, as our thank you to everybody who attended today's session, we're offering a free and confidential network security assessment. And this isn't an offer for a fancy report that you know, we'll produce and drop on your desk that nobody will want to read. Well, no one will want to read it, but I will. And after I do, I'll personally meet with you and explain in plain English what we found and what you should consider fixing. And I'll go one better because we've been adding new tools to our arsenal, and I want to demonstrate how we're always looking for better ways to protect our clients. So I've I've got what I call a bittersweet gift for everybody in attendance today. I'm sure you're all aware of or heard of the dark web, but without getting into too many details. The dark web is where you can buy or sell anything, from heroin to humans. It's all out there, and it's really sad. But anyway, I searched the dark web for sites that sell compromised credentials, IDs, and passwords related to each of your businesses. And for obvious reasons, I'm not going to provide any details, but let me just say that without exception, every business represented here today has at least one set of credentials available for sale on the dark web. In fact, in this group, the average number of compromised credentials is 22. Some of you have one or two, and others have 100 or more IDs and passwords actively for sale on the dark web. And this information is available to every cyber criminal who cares to have it. When it is for sale, it's cheap, and you can buy thousands of records for a couple $100. It's ridiculous. Some of the data I found is old. Lots of it's new and could be very dangerous in the wrong hands. And back to the passwords, if you never change your passwords, even the old data can be dangerous. And again, I won't get into details, but if you contact me after the webinar, excuse me, I'll be happy to share what I found about your company with you individually. It's a real eye-opener. Krista, we have any questions?
Yes, one question is, what program do you recommend for data backup? We currently use Carbonite, which we know is not sufficient since it's an incremental backup. In light of your discussion, what do you recommend?
Well, it's not that simple. You really have to consider with the backups what it is you're trying to accomplish and your tolerance for pain. You know, some businesses can actually go without their data for much longer than others. You know, there's a lot of options out there. Everything we do ends up with some kind of copy of their data offsite. A lot of our options have a local copy as well, which gives us the ability to virtualize the entire server. So if an entire server dies, it's no longer a matter of repairing the server or procuring a new server and reloading the data, which could take days or even weeks. Some of the solutions out there today actually mirror the entire server. So within 10 or 15 minutes, we can spin up a virtual copy, have everyone log off and back on, and be back in business, which takes the emergency out of emergency recovery. If it does result in you need new hardware, it gives you the luxury of time to actually go and get a server or a replacement that's right for your business rather than get whatever's available to get you over the hump. But again, if your tolerance for pain is higher, we have a handful of products similar to Carbonite. I don't like Carbonite because they throttle your ability to recover data. I can't recommend anyone specifically, but if you talk to me afterwards, we'll talk about your specific needs and I'll make some recommendations.
Okay, next question is backing up to the cloud versus local backup and take off site ?
Again, you really have to decide what it is you're trying to accomplish. Absolutely should be backed up to the cloud. We all remember Hurricane Sandy. Everyone likes to think it's not going to happen. Well, as we've seen, it does happen. We had some clients down in Kearney, and they were, 5-6 feet underwater. Not only was their office destroyed, their file server was destroyed. They had no access to anything. Luckily, we had their data backed up to the cloud. They were able to go home and access their data from their home offices or from their PCs on the road, whatever the case may be. So it really comes down to what it is you're trying to accomplish. But absolutely, especially in today's environment, there's so much competition out there for cloud storage. You'd really be silly not to have something out in the cloud just to protect yourself, have that second line of defense.
Okay, we have another question, but I think this one's for Jerry. Has SQL Gateway been phased out in version 17.1? Jerry, you there?
Sorry, my phone was muted. I'm talking, answering the question.
You never sounded better.
Sorry about that. Yes, SQL Gateway is phased out in version 17. So if you're currently using that, it will be replaced with what's called the SQL Replicator. And there is no migration path for it. It's just that they're not supporting it any longer.
Okay, great. That's all the questions we have.
Wow, we did pretty well on time.
There's one more thing. I'm nervous about the dark web thing you were talking about. Can you tell me a little more about what it is and how my stuff got there?
A lot of times it's not necessarily a breach of your network. When we search the dark web, we're searching for anything that has, for instance, my email address is right there, bbilland@mtsnj.com. What I'm searching for is any kind of credentials that have mtsnj.com in them. So a lot of people freak out right away. They think, oh, my server's been breached. Everybody can buy access to my server right online. More times than not, that's not the case. What it is, it's other places where you've used your email address as your ID, and they get breached, and then that information becomes available to anybody. But why is that so dangerous? You think, well, so what? Somebody has the email address and password to LinkedIn. Big deal. Again, if you're using the same password in multiple places, that is a big deal. Or if you tend to use the same logic or habits when you create a password. Maybe all your passwords are related to the New York Giants or the New York Mets, whatever the case may be. It's like I was saying earlier. It's so easy to gather up information about anybody that it's ridiculous. If I could get into your LinkedIn account, for instance, I might learn your date of birth. I might learn information about people in your employ, and from there I can create phishing emails that mimic you, for instance. That I can message somebody from within your account on your staff, and they'll think, oh, okay, well, they figure they're just chatting with you. They divulge information that they shouldn't. So it's a big deal. But contact me after. I'll happy to share what I found, and we can talk about how you can't really get rid of that data. It's out there. I'm sure most of the people in Hollywood wish they could delete some of the information on the internet, but once it's there, it's there. But what you can do is make it obsolete. If you've got a handful of IDs and passwords that are compromised, you need to figure out where they came from and go change those passwords, because anybody purchasing that information, won't get anywhere with it. So again, give me a shout afterwards. I'll be happy to share what I found. It's a real eye-opener.
If you have to do a network audit, what can I expect to learn?
Ooh, our audit's pretty comprehensive. On average, we're gonna drop a report of about 80 to 100 pages on your desk. We go over things like like we talked about a little bit here. Password policies, whether they're forced policies or just voluntary policies, how to make them forced. We'll look at open ports on your firewall, insecure ports, remote access. We'll do a lot of what Jerry was kind of touching on, which is look at the size and capacity of your devices. I think all told, there's probably about 30 different topics that we cover. Trying to think of some of them. Maybe web filtering or spam filtering. We'll look at the strength of your virus protection on your machines, whether it's deployed properly or sporadically. Again, there's about 26 different things. I'll be happy to share a sample report if you want to see one. It takes us about an hour to collect the information, and it's not intrusive. We don't install any software that doesn't immediately get deleted, and we don't copy any confidential information. We don't copy passwords. We install the software, we gather the information, and automatically deletes itself, and then we produce this giant report that it takes about an hour to go over with any degree of detail. But when you're done, you'll have a very clear picture of where you need to tighten things up.
Okay, great. I think that's all the questions we have for today. If you do decide you have a question, you can feel free to contact us, and we'll be happy to answer it for you. We want to thank you all for attending today's webinar, and I will be emailing out the presentation to everyone later today. Have a great day, everyone.